One of the things that I always come back from a cruise is really with the concept of don't waste your life. I really have the opportunity here recently to spend a couple of weeks in Asia on a 6-star cruise line where I have to imagine the average net worth was north of 20 million or so. The average age was also up there, probably 65 to 68. We had some very in-depth conversations because we had 5 or 6 at sea days. You really get to know what people are thinking. And again, it is so shocking to me, Dion, how many people on paper are successful. And again, successful being some kind of financial number, but all they want to talk about is regret. And it almost seems like it's a sport, right? Like don't and I'm just always taken aback by how many people are, rich on paper, but really seem to have just wasted their life. So I thought we should talk about it, should take it our own direction. So when you hear about rich and successful people being unhappy, regretful, what do you think about?
So I kind of had a direction I want to go in, but I think I've had an epiphany. One of the reasons why I retired, I had reached financial freedom and was continuing to work for about 4 years. Uh, but I took a cruise. And now it was Norwegian, large, thousands of people on it. I didn't do the 6-star. And based on one of your recent daily updates, I think I'm glad I did because it was so much stuff to do. I was never
Yeah.
bored.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll never do a small boat again. There's
Right.
not enough
So
to do.
I think until you said that, I probably would have thought, oh, it has more stars. It's got to be better. Let me do that. I would have kept up with the Joneses and spent more money to try to do what you did, and then realized, wow, this doesn't suck. But
You could take 4 or 5 Norwegian cruises for the price that I paid for this one.
Yeah, especially since I live right by Seattle. I just go. There's a website. I wish I knew it. I would plug it for them. But you just watch, and you can go in like a week or two. And
Vacations to go.
Vacations to go. It's like sometimes half
Beautiful.
price, third of the price. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But on the cruise, right, the Mediterranean one was okay. There was more families there, but the Alaska one, it was the median age. It had to be 60 something. There
Yeah.
were people with walkers that would watch the people go to shore. There was in Mykonos, we had to do the tender, the smaller boat, and
Yeah.
there was one like in her 70s lady that comes up, puts her hand on my shoulder and says, "Can you carry me over there?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's go jump over to the boat." But there was dozens of people standing there. It was like, "Yeah, I just tender in the boat. We're going like this." They don't get to experience the whole island.
Yeah.
And so that cruise to Alaska, I came back from it and I thought, I love my job. I've been demoted down to president. I have control of my schedule. I'm making a ton of money now. Finally, it wasn't for the first 8 years working there, right? Once my rental income became more than my work income, the job kind of said, maybe we should probably pay him some more to try to keep him around. Wasn't worth it. I had great employers. The people who own the company were awesome to work with. They live in another state, had autonomy, right? I mean, I had to justify stuff, but I went on that cruise and I thought, okay, I love my job. This is great. But do I want to be that person that finally gets the time freedom to travel and do this kind of things so I can watch from that side of the ship?
Yeah. I mean, every time I go on a cruise, and again, we did this 6-star, the last one we did a Viking, which is even smaller, right? River cruise. And I come back from those. I am back less than 12 hours and I'm having this conversation because it always hits so hard that
Yeah.
there are people 65, 70, 75 that on paper, you're listening to this, they're worth 20 to 30 million bucks and they regret their life choices. So, I think everybody's story is probably different and it should, but there are certainly some themes that we've seen, right? One of the themes that I saw certainly on the Viking cruise, kind of a little bit to your story, was people had enough, but they kept working. And one conversation I remember, the guy worked an extra couple of decades, right? He basically worked until he was forced out. He was a CEO, president, owner type. And he's like, "Michael, that was the stupidest thing I've ever done. I could have taken a buyout 20 years earlier, been healthy, had my spouse." Unfortunately, he was traveling single because he lost his wife during that 20 years. And that hit me so hard it was like, know your number, right? Know when to go. Don't just, they don't give a rat's ass about you. You'll be replaced in a moment. You will be forgotten in a week. And I mean, that one conversation still haunts me, right? He's worth 9 figures. And he says, I should have quit 20 years ago when I was worth, 20 million, whatever. It's crazy.
Man, I don't know if I can share this in the video. Maybe if I'm willing to, I'll come back to it. So there's studies done, and you're an econ major, you'll probably name the study. I don't remember the name of the study, but up to, and this was a while ago, so it's probably bigger numbers now, but up to about $75,000, your quality of life drastically improves with the amount of money that you make. So if you're making 30, you're struggling, your poverty level in the US, you're almost top 1% worldwide, but your poverty level in the US, and if you're making 50, now you probably have, maybe you buy a house, you own your car, you do this. And when you make 75, you have healthcare, you have housing, you have the food you want, you have all the stuff. And above 75, your life doesn't really improve much. It's probably 100,000 now with inflation, but at some point that money goes on. And I've seen so many of those studies, and I think here's the element that they're missing. And it's the element that the people that you were talking about on this cruise were missing. The amount of money coming in doesn't impact our happiness, because that would be then related to the job, right? If you can make $100,000 a year in a job you love, you're probably happier than if you're making $100,000 a year in a job you hate. If you make $100,000 a year from a source where you don't have to sell your life 1 hour at a time, that doesn't give you a schedule, an alarm clock, a boss, customers, compliance, and all the things that you have to do with your job, that money comes in. Now your quality of life is covered, and you can, if you know the magic number, and you can actually have the discipline to say, that's enough. That's what so many people can't do. Once you know it's enough, and you can have the time freedom that comes from the amount of money coming in to give you the quality of life that you want, that you don't have to work for.
That's
I
the key.
believe money can bring happiness.
No, yeah, they're trying. It's called marginal utility. That's essentially what the study was: marginal utility of the next dollar. And you're absolutely right. And again, it's addictive. It's ego. It's all of these things. But again, folks, try to step back. Small and mighty. Coach Carson, Dion talk financial freedom, lumberjack. All of us. If you can get to that enough number, congratulations. And frankly, if you choose to work, great, but just know you're choosing to work, right? Don't end up at 90 worth $100 million, regretting the last 20 years of your life, the loss of your spouse, all of these other health things. Because again, when you're 90 and worth $100 million, it doesn't matter. You can't take it to the grave, right? He said, he goes, Michael, best case, I got 5 years left, probably 2. And he's like, maybe 6 months of travel left in me, because it's just hard. Everything's hard at 90. It doesn't get easier. Yeah, he had some helper with him. I mean, it's just sad. So there's another one that I think about: don't waste your life. And I struggled with this, and I think all young people do it, but I'm going to put it here anyway, just hopefully maybe it stops somebody. And that is, it's often called keeping up with the Joneses. It's basically letting your life expenses expand as your income goes up, right? One of the things I love about Cody, who I talk to, I think on Mondays now, usually. Cody is, he's got to be worth multiple 7 figures, and he lives on $2,500 a month, right? He's 20, I don't know, call him 25 now. And he's just stacking assets and not letting that monthly nut grow. Do you know how genius that is? How uncommon that is? Do you know what his freaking life is going to look like when he's 35? I mean, come on. It's crazy.
So 2 things. First, on the Cody thing, Cody's a friend, right? So I would never say something about him when he wasn't in the room that I wouldn't say while he was in the room. I think sometimes who we choose to have in our life has an impact. And he's engaged to Ashley, and Ashley is a very well-rounded person as far as finances come. And I think that they're balancing each other out to right sizing makes more sense than ultimate growth. Don't know the behind the doors conversations, just my perception after spending time with them. So choose the right person. I think it has a massive impact. But the other thing is this keeping up with the Joneses goes both ways, right? There's the, you have shared the story where you had somebody working for you who had a bigger house,
Yeah.
and you were a little dyspeptic about that. Like it gave you stomach pains, and
it made me question life, Dion. Let's
made you
just be
quiet. There
honest.
you go. So let's flip the coin and let's go. If we weren't in the circle of friends that we are, and I'll have a couple of examples, what would our life look like? Do we think if the lumberjack landlord never started YouTube, never found one rental at a time, never interacted with us, never saw the Pink Panther meme for 2 years straight, and was thinking, if I retire by 46 years old, 6 months and 15 days, I'm a day before Zuber and I win at life, like that keeping up with the Joneses was getting his time freedom in competition with you, in peer pressure from me. Then we take it to the next step because Matt did retire, and no one will ever know. He probably might have done it sooner without us. Who knows? But Millennial Mike, the peer pressure, the constant reminder of interacting with us and going, how important is your kid? Now you have another on the way. You have a risky job. This is what it would take. This is the time freedom that can come. I think the motivation to stay focused, to have the discipline to figure out what enough is to make those life changes. The keeping up with the Joneses with Mike isn't the fancy car, isn't the fancy vacations, isn't the Rolex. It's the cash flow.
Yeah.
It's the working assets. It's the learning new strategies with private money, and he's done Burr methods and those things. That's keeping up with the Joneses. That sets you up for financial freedom, time freedom, and now you have your whole life to go. Do I want to work?
Yeah.
Or do I want to do something that I don't have to worry about the pay because I love what the job is? And it's just, if he didn't interact with us, if he didn't interact with investors, and he thought, like I did when I was a police officer, 20 years, pension, maybe stay longer to get the pension more, compared to the time freedom that comes from, right? Most people define work-life balance differently than I do. Most people think work-life balance is don't work more than 12 hours a day because that's more than half a day. Don't work 7 days a week because you need time off to reset. And I don't think any of that. What I think for work-life balance is not days or weeks or hours, decades. We should all have at least one work decade, maybe two, and then freedom for the rest of our life. That's the balance.
Yeah, see, there's so much genius in that because, again, it's simple. And it's really funny. My conversation with Brandon Turner, which was awesome. I appreciate him coming on. And one of the things that I took from him is his simple genius around naming things. Because if you could take a concept, name it, then it becomes yours. So I want this to be yours. We have to think in decades, right? And you just said it. It's okay to work. I'll call hustle, sacrifice, live below your means for a decade, maybe a decade and a half, but you're buying multiple decades, right? So we've got to figure out a sexy name for whatever that is.
Maybe someone can help us out in the comments with that.
Yeah, let us know what that should be called, because if we can get that, like Burr, Brandon talked about, he was the first guy to create Burr, and now we throw it around like it's, Xerox or whatever, right? But so, to your point about Millennial Mike, you got to get in the right room and the right network. That's what Mike has done on purpose, was get around the right folks. Because if you don't, you're going to be like I was, right? I was in software. I was around sales guys. And until I was 30 years old, maybe 31, I thought it was about the next $300 Ferragamo belt, the next, God, some of the stupid shit I got upstairs, like the purple label, Ralph Lauren or whatever this crazy, expensive non-baubles are. That's what I thought it was. Take your commission check, go buy a fancy watch, go buy a custom tailored suit, and get around the right people. That's why I love the fact that we have this growing school community, because it only attracts people like-minded and like attitudes. It's very much, I think, what Millennial Mike would join. if he was starting out again, because you got to pay to be in the right rooms. And again, we're talking about 67 pennies a day. I mean, give me a break. But I just love it more and more that community is growing, and frankly, you're a part of it. So thank you.
So here's something I think I maybe learned this recently, which is weird because I'm kind of long in the tooth to be learning things. But I was talking with Frank and Cynthia when I stopped in California on my way driving up here. And we kind of talked about how much content a person takes in, or how long they're in a school mastermind or one of those things, and sometimes hours that it can be. So Millennial Mike and Tia, his girlfriend, I'm going to call her fiance just to mess with him, comes over here. We walk down, we get on the ferry, we take the slow ferry, which is an hour to Seattle. We walk around the waterfront, we go to Pike Place Market, we go to lunch on the waterfront, and then we take the hour ride back. So it's like a 6-hour day hanging out. Mike and I didn't have a deep conversation until hour 5. So when you get around somebody, there's this, what's going on? How are you? What have you been up to? Top layer stuff. And then whatever we were doing. So if you're in a mastermind and it's an hour long, it's probably it's a topic to give people time to get their questions ready. And then it's a few questions. But if you're in a room with the right people for the 3rd and the 4th hour, and people are past the ice breaking walls and the chit chat, then Mike breaks down actual numbers on some deals he's doing. And the questions were actually, I could see he was almost not present like where he was sitting. He was present in a room with his portfolio laid out around him, thinking of what levers can I pull, while talking to somebody who has a little bit more experience, has already reached financial freedom, and can give that direction. That doesn't happen in a 20-minute conversation. That doesn't happen hanging out for an hour. That happens from being around the people and having enough conversation to go to that subconscious level where the things you don't know you're worried about can come out and be addressed.
And the other thing you got to say there is consistency, right? Mike doesn't have that deep conversation with you the first 6 hours he's with you. You and him have been boys for a long time, have been through it, trusted each other, come out the other side in good faith. But that's just time and consistency, and really learning who someone is. And that's what's so important about this. Again, getting back to don't waste your life. One of my 7 rules is to fire your friends. I mean, I say it harshly because I want it to be harsh. Some of you are around some toxic freaking people that don't want you to succeed. They're like crabs pulling you back in the bucket.
It's funny that you said that, because I just did a video on toxic assets. And towards the end, I talked about, people talk about relationships being assets. Us knowing each other, I learned something every time. I've got a page of notes, right, from the conversation. We're making a video to help people. I have a page of notes. I think this is benefiting. Hopefully sometimes I say something that helps you.
Yeah.
And
notes right here.
And in that video, I actually have, so if relationships can be assets, they can be liabilities.
Oh, for sure.
And I use the crab in the bucket thing. They'll pull you back down to their level. They might not even know it. There's jealousy. If they want to keep up with the Joneses, it's really hard to do it if you don't even have to work anymore. Like, get around the right people. And I like your audit your network. I think it's rule number 7.
I think so.
5. What's one of those? It's one of the rules. And they did a study. Sitting next to a productive person can make you more productive by 15%.
It's number 7.
Sitting next to an unproductive person can lower you by 30%.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Get around A players. I mean, that's one of the things you took away. And again, as a leader, software leader, it was very obvious that study was on the mark. So again, don't waste your life. When I think about that, again, that story of that 90-year-old, the story of keeping up with the Joneses and getting around the right people, with Millennial Mike being a great example. The other one that I don't know where I come down on, but I'd love to get your thoughts, is this whole notion of follow your passion and you never work a day in your life. I think that's crap, frankly.
There was nothing. Every joke that came to mind was not clean enough for YouTube. I'm going to stop that. But follow your passion is great advice after financial freedom?
Boom. Exactly. This is back to your decade concept. That's why we've got to find a way to name that thing. You're going to bust your butt for a decade, maybe a decade and a half, right? My wealth formula is simple on purpose. Create disposable income. Increase your income, lower your expenses, do both, right? That's your grind phase. Then become elite at something is step 2. And then step 3 is a decade. It takes a decade. Do it for a decade, right? This whole follow your passion, you never work a day in your life, that's a recipe to be poor, right? Do it on the other side.
Sorry, All Nighter Hider sent me a video yesterday. I was on a hike, and I watched the video, and it's this guy talking about it might have been a different hobby, but it was like scuba instructors don't make a lot of money, but look how happy they are and how much they love their life. Great. Okay. But they're also not making enough money to have a retirement, because you can't scuba forever as an instructor, right? There's those harder dives that you need to teach. You're not carrying your gear at 70 down the stairs. But if you reach financial freedom and you've made work optional, and then you travel, I mean, as much scuba as I've done, when I go to the island of Koh Tao in Thailand, there's a school called, I'm going to give them a shout out, the Caribou School. It's a freaking amazing school. But the instructors go out in the morning, teach classes, then they're off in the afternoon, and they go do dives. And the other instructors do dives in the morning and then go teach classes in the afternoon. So they rotate. So I just go with the instructors in the morning that aren't working, and then with the instructors in the afternoon when they're not working. And so I get the instructor dives without taking the courses or anything. Could absolutely probably go up to the gentleman that owns it, and if I remembered his name, I would give him a shout out and say, hey, I'll work here because it's financial freedom and work is optional. I can absolutely follow my passion. But that sounds like a schedule.
Yeah, that's a schedule. You don't like schedules.
Right.
Yeah. But no, that's the beauty, right? I'll say it right now. One of the things I love talking to people like yourself and creating content on YouTube. I would do it for free. In fact, I did do it for free for thousands of videos. But there's no way I could have done this, 30 years ago. I didn't have the experience, didn't have the knowledge, couldn't invest the time, right? I did a chart for Sean Cannell from Think Media. It's probably been 18 months, but it basically showed how I made $1 million in 5 years from this channel. But what people didn't realize is the first year I made 1,100. The second year, I don't remember what it was. Call it, I don't know, 45, 50. Now that's all in. That's YouTube, this books, that's the whole, like, what did it do for me? But it just explodes from there. So again, there's a thing to following your passion, and you'll never work a day, but do it after you grind, after you work, after you have the financial flexibility to go, oh yeah, I can drop $5,000 on a full YouTube studio and the best camera and this and then that, and not need an immediate return. It's just different.
Well, I think you just defined it as far as how chasing your passion goes. If you quit your job and you started doing YouTube 5 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you had to make the money to cover the expenses, and the expenses would grow with the studio and the events and that, and you had to make the money. And if you missed a day because you went on a cruise or whatever, you lost the revenue, you put your business model at risk.
Yeah.
That's not chasing your passion.
Yeah. It's funny you bring that up, because I actually looked at it. One of the things you know this as a YouTube creator, you can watch your financial stats. So on an average day, one rental at a time, let's call it, makes $200 a day. But I go on a cruise and I only do one video a day. Occasionally a friend or so will kick in another one. I wasn't making $200 a day. I was making $40 a day. Oh, by the way, the books and the courses and all those other things, nothing. Right. So I went from doing, I don't know, call it $1,500 a week to $100 a week. Doesn't matter.
And that's the litmus test for guru, right? If the person you're watching has to make their money off, there is one person that I know of that I watch because they make their money off of teaching you how to make courses and grow a YouTube channel. because that's their business model. Sean Cannell, he goes,
Mhm.
here's how you make YouTube productive, right?
Yep.
But if I'm going to watch somebody like, I don't know, the Ryan Pinedas, the
Mhm.
David Greens, the Brandon Turners, the Michael Zubers, the Lumberjack Landlords, I'm going, how do they, where does their money come
Where does the actual money come
Right.
from?
And if they didn't have a course, does their portfolio support their lifestyle? All right. And so Millennial Mike had his early videos that were very viral, where here's the gurus. If you take away the money they're making from YouTube, you don't want their life. You don't want the way they have to live. And so that was very important to me, is to find people where the things I'm investing in, people invested in those rentals, and the rentals supported their life. That's who I'm going to follow, because my YouTube doesn't make $200 a day,
Mm.
right? I don't even know if it makes 200 a week sometimes. So I do this, but I am also not doing 5 hours a day. Don't have a book yet, right? Working on that. But the time freedom that comes from getting around the right people with the right asset classes and the mindset, it's definitely not a wasted life.
Yeah, I mean that's what. So let's kind of close on that, because again, I see. I don't know what the percentage is, but too many people at the end or near the end would if you gave them truth serum, say they wasted their life. And I think a lot of it's back to your earlier point, is we don't understand there's a grind phase, a work phase, a work decade, whatever you want to call that. And if you get committed to that, whatever you're doing, you can buy decades in the future. I don't know what that is. Again, folks, let us know in the comments below if we can start naming this thing, because that's got to become a Dionism. This needs to be Dion's thing. I'm not trying to steal it. It's got to be his thing. But yeah.
So I'll wrap up with something that is kind of a paradigm shift for people. If you ask most people how to define success, they'll go to the psychology reason. The definition of success is the continuous realization of a dream. So that's how psychology defines success. I think that the real definition of success is if you go to somebody in their later years, 70s or 80s, or on hospice, and you say, and you ask the question everybody does, what would you do different?
Yeah.
The person that has a list of things that they would change was not successful. The person who thinks, and this is my answer when people say, oh, if you started today, what would you do different? They're like, but not, they don't ask that way. They go, if you could go back to when you started, what would you do different? I wouldn't want to risk it, because the outcome of financial freedom is so positive.
Yeah.
That I'm fine that I didn't start until I'm 40. I'm fine that I started in bad debt. I'm fine that I started as a single parent. I'm fine that I started after getting laid off from law enforcement. I'm fine that I had all of these barriers I had to go around. Because yeah, it still took a decade, but
Only a decade.
The next decades are so phenomenal. I wouldn't put it at risk to go back. What would you say to your 18-year-old self? Nothing.
Yeah. You like where you ended up. I love it.
Yeah. That's, to me, that's success.
Yeah. Dion, where can they find you?
Right here on YouTube, Dion Talk Financial Freedom.
Thank you, buddy.
Ciao.